And I'm sorry to say this to people who are supporters of the NDP who watch this podcast, but this really is a binary choice. There are 5 parties, but this is a choice between the Conservatives and the Liberals.
Hello and welcome everybody back to the Radical Center. We are back and we are ready, and there's a lot going on right now, Cody. Is there a lot going on? Is there nothing going on? What's going on?
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I was thinking about earlier today, and the news cycle, I think this election campaign, unlike previous election campaigns, there's going to be something that voters are basically going to be given a fire hose, and it's going to be rapid fire one after the other. But I just have a weird feeling that once we get into like the last 2 weeks and the last week of the campaign, I think it could be one of the most, how can I say it, most browbeat campaign that we've ever experienced.
I absolutely think so. It's something that's going to be certainly studied, especially if Carney ends up winning. How do you go from being a party that's in such deep turmoil, that has like no chance in hell in making a comeback, and then a few months later the polls are changing, and I joked with a friend of mine the other day. I said, Canadians were parking their votes with Pierre Poilievre to keep Justin out of winning. And now they're parking their votes with Carney to keep Pierre out of winning. So I'm like, what is going on? But we'll see. It's still early on. It's one of those where it's just too hard to predict. It's just too hard to figure out what's going on. So they've had launches. They all launched their campaigns. Mark Carney's was very interesting. He went to the governor general, and he asked for her permission to call an election, went and called an election, and we expected this to happen. We knew it was going to happen. It was all over the news that it was going to happen on Sunday. I was kind of, last time we spoke, I was kind of still thinking, should he wait? But maybe he shouldn't. Maybe I was, I'll admit, maybe I was wrong. He should just go for it and make it happen. And I'm starting to see that. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the things that he's facing challenges on this week. So it's probably a good idea that he went pretty early on. But let's talk a little bit about the launches. I'd love to hear your perspective. We were talking about it a little bit before we started recording. What did you see? What stood out to you from the launches of all parties?
Well, first off, I want to say I'm happy and disappointed at the same time, because I got the day of the election call right, but I got the actual election day wrong. I was off by 7 days. But I mean, I did say somewhere around May 5th, so maybe that's a little bit of a gray area. But no, it's right. We are in the federal election. It is early, snap, whatever the hell you want to call it. The election is here. Starting off with Mark Carney, he did the traditional Rideau Hall speech that the prime minister normally does. When prime ministers do this, it's usually like milquetoast, and then we're off to the races, right? He then flew out to Newfoundland, where I was born, and he was faced with crab protesters who were upset with the quota that the Ministry of Fisheries put on crab. He did acknowledge them. He acknowledged that they were there and that he wanted to hear them out. All the while, police locked the doors out on them. But that issue is more local. It's not something that's going to be felt across the country. It's more something that's local. As I said before we got on here, I think that Pierre's launch was nothing extraordinary. I think it was the best, but not by much. He did a speech across the river in Gatineau facing Parliament in the background. He appeared with a softer image with his family, and I think that he did hit all the right notes. Then he went to a rally in the Liberal bastion of North York, and many people did show up for that. But I think the biggest loser in all of this was Jagmeet Singh, and his launch was pretty pathetic. I didn't even watch the entire thing, because he really had no message. And the problem, which we'll talk about, is that this guy propped up this government time after time, claiming to get dental care and farmer care, and yet he didn't get credit for any of it. So, but we'll get more into that as time goes on. But what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about the unfortunate situation the NDP finds themselves in, right? But we'll get into that. I agree with you. I think there's nothing too exciting. I don't think the average person is going to remember any of these launches, but I think there are a lot of local issues regionally in each region that are at play that may actually have quite a significant impact on this election rather than like just an overall issue. Obviously, the overall issue is who's the best leader to deal with Trump, right? We know that, we get that, but there's issues at play in Peel region that are different than what issues are going to be at play in Quebec, and that's, I think, very much true. Talking about Quebec, there will be two debates in Quebec. I don't know why Toronto doesn't get a debate anymore. I don't know why, but the two debates are going to be in Montreal, both the English and the French, and they're going to be one day apart. Carney seems to have a little bit of a hard time in French. He doesn't seem to have, full grasp on the language. I don't think he seems to be very comfortable with it. What do you think is going to happen? What should we expect in these debates?
Well, I think the debates are certainly going to be exciting to watch. And I know we may or may not do something that night. We'll just put it out there as a teaser to
We
people.
are.
We'll see
We
what
are.
happens.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing to watch is that Mark Carney hasn't been tested before. And as I said during the leadership debates, he didn't come out as a winner and he didn't come out as a loser. He did clearly have trouble speaking in a conversational manner. When I took French in high school, my French teacher, she said, Cody, you really get a grasp of the basic communication skills in French, but you're terrible at doing it in a conversational manner.
Mm-hmm.
I also said in I think it was the episode we had after the provincial election, that he would not fare well against Pierre Poilievre and Jagmeet Singh, let alone Yves-François Blanchet. I did find it a little bit arrogant of him on Monday to tell a reporter that he wasn't afraid to debate Pierre Poilievre in French. And then a few hours later, he didn't want to do a debate, face à face is what it's called. That's how you pronounce it in French, I guess, with TVA, the biggest French TV station in Quebec. We know money is not the issue because Pierre Poilievre offered to pay the fee, which was kind of funny. I think that was kind of tongue-in-cheek. But we also know that the absence of Elizabeth May is not an issue because the Conservatives and the Bloc said that they would welcome her on stage. And look, from a political view, I could understand why he only wants to do one. And that's simply because he cannot articulate the delicate balance that you have to do between Francophone and English Canada. And he does not want to be wedged on something like the pipeline argument, which, as we just discussed, there's a lot of regional issues. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of my opinion on that. Tom Mulcair, former leader of the NDP, he also said that he thought it was a terrible idea. But what do you think?
I think you're right. I also think that there is an element of Pierre being just a stronger French speaker than him, and also having that strong personality and strong presence and being able to aggressively go after him, which he will do because that's what Pierre does. And he's a bit of a pit bull himself, even though usually the leader is not supposed to be the pit bull or the attack dog. But yeah, he is. I don't know. Look, if Carney had to make this choice, knowing his own challenges, right? Like clearly, this is an area of challenge for him and he has to make that decision. I don't know. It might be the right decision for him to, say, okay, I'm doing one. I'm going to take all the shots that I'm going to end up taking. I'm going to do my best and it is what it is. And then the second one will be in English where he'll probably be extremely comfortable and maybe he'll be able to take on Pierre a little bit more, or he might surprise us. Like he might surprise us, but I can understand why he wouldn't want to open himself up to multiple debates in French, and there isn't multiple debates in English, right? So, but this might hurt him in Quebec. But the other question is Quebec really going to vote for Pierre? And I don't know. I don't think the answer to that is yes, right?
I would just add that I think it's too early to tell. Mm-hmm. The numbers may not change. I just think it's too early to tell. Yes, the campaign is short. 4 weeks is a long time in politics, and debates and campaigns, they do matter.
Hmm.
So the numbers could stay the way they are. And if we get to the debates and the numbers stay the way they are, politically, yes, it would be running a front runner campaign. So yes, I could see that being true if the numbers stay the same.
And the other thing about it is this will be a very watched debate, right? I keep comparing to the provincial election because it just happened and it was so recent and such a big contrast between the two. I don't know if a lot of people watch that debate, right?
No, I turned it off. I don't know if I said that, but I turned it off. I watched 5-10 minutes of it, and and
It
I
got pretty
I
annoying.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it was just you
but
know
but
who
I
was
think that's
going to win the election. So
yeah.
this is different. There's going to be more engagement, right?
Yeah, and also there's a new guy, right? Like there's this new guy that we don't really know, and he's the prime minister, and there's like all this interest surrounding that. I think you're right. I think, the debates will make a difference, but I think the overall picture of how things are shaping up does favor Carney, especially today, for example. We're recording this on Wednesday, I have to say. But, Trump's tariffs on the auto sector, basically he had to pause his campaign to go back to Ottawa to have a cabinet meeting, right? That stuff is going to help him. That's going to play in his favor. I was thinking when I saw that, I'm like, is Donald Trump trying to get I don't understand why he's doing this right now. Clearly he didn't listen to Danielle Smith, but not that he should. I don't think he should interfere in our democracy, but this stuff is going to certainly help Carney do quite a bit better than he would if this wasn't a factor. If he was just, if the factor was just between him and Pierre, and there isn't this comparison to who is going to take on Donald Trump, who is going to deal with him best. So I think that's going to be, but I think we're getting off topic here. Both Carney and Pierre are saying they're going to cut our taxes. I know you love hearing the words cut taxes. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think this is going to be one of those things where both parties are going to make promises.
Mm-hmm.
The Liberals are trying to appeal more to the center. Pierre, again, the Conservatives, they've historically been the party of tax cuts. And at a time when Canadians are feeling the pinch, giving less money to the government and more to families is a really good thing. And I think what Pierre said could be more true. And the fact is that in Canada, it seems that the more you work, the more you're punished. This because this Liberal government believes that they should decide what to do with your own paycheck. And I think that the Conservatives are saying that the government should be out of your wallet and out of your bedroom. But again, these promises, if you're an average voter and you're sitting down and you're looking at both of these promises, they're very similar. Yes, the Conservatives are claiming that they're going to give you a little bit more money back. But at the end of the day, if you're a voter, that it's actually going to sit down and see, what party is going to be best for you in terms of your pocketbook.
I agree. But if that's the ballot box question, again, if that's the question that they are using to determine who they're going to vote for, interesting. It's a very interesting turn of events where we had a very different government just a few months ago, not really talking much about cutting taxes, except in the last couple of weeks, Justin Trudeau decided to give everybody a break with a GST, with the pause or the holiday. But yeah, very interesting, very different perspectives. Same party, but just a different guy, and he's running it completely differently. The biggest story of the week, I think this is the biggest story of the week. ISIS is saying that India organized support for Poilievre's 2022 conservative leadership race. Pretty shocking. That's shocking information. I think there was always these questions about why is Pierre not getting his clearance, and we've been hearing about foreign interference for years now, and he never got his clearance. He never found out what it was about. What do you think about this?
Well, there was a lot of things that unfolded yesterday. This was obviously one of the things when I talked about voters getting hit with a fire hose of information, that this is it. And I'll start off by saying my gut reaction. The first when I opened up the article, I was outraged because I knew exactly what was happening, and that is in the middle of an election, an unnamed source with top secret clearance, not a CSIS report itself, is leaking secret information to a reporter. And look, I'm sure that there will be people who will make the argument that people leak to reporters all the time. And if they want to go out on a limb and make that argument, they can. I don't really care. But in my opinion, it becomes election interference when you use your access to intelligence to smear a politician. Intelligence is just a collection of information. It's not a finding of fact. And we talked about this just a few months ago. There was an inquiry, and the person leading that inquiry was a judge. I can never pronounce her name right, but she wrapped this all up. And, you know, the source even said that Pierre and his team knew nothing about it, that it wasn't a sustained effort.
Well,
it never had
clearance. He'll never know about it if he doesn't have clearance.
They don't know anyways. And it never had an impact on the outcome. And Patrick Brown himself said that. His number one opponent, the person that I voted for, he came out and said that he didn't see an issue. But what's more important here, don't take my word for it. Take the word for somebody else who's actually been in the job. And that is Tom Mulcair. He's a former leader of the NDP. He's a former leader of the official opposition. And he even said back in July, when we talked about this, when this all started, that it was wise for him not to take the clearance because it would have dictated what he could do as the leader of the opposition. And last night, he reiterated his support for that. Thomas Mulcair said on CTV last night that when Stephen Harper had sensitive information that the leader of the opposition needed to be made aware of, he would set up a call and he would call him personally. Stephen Harper would call the leader of the opposition and say, hey, A, B, C, and D is going to come out soon. You're going to hear about this. You should know about it. Look, in my personal opinion, because we've known about this for a long time, Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney, because Mark Carney knew about this. He knew about this at the same time that Justin Trudeau did. They've been playing politics with a very important issue from the very beginning. They knew this was going.
I don't disagree with that. Yeah, they have been.
They knew this was going to come out. Anybody who tell you that Mark Carney, even though he didn't have a security clearance, I know 100% sure because I know how this stuff works behind the scenes. They knew about this. They knew this was going to come out. And instead of telling the public that intelligence is just a collection of information, it's not a finding of fact, conveniently comes out on day 2 or day 3 of a campaign. So my first instinct is outrage, but I talked a lot, so I'll let you give your opinion.
Well, I understand where you're coming from, but my question is, don't Canadians have a right to know, especially when there's an election going on, and at some point they're going to have to make up their minds and make a decision on who's going to become prime minister. So for me, it's a little bit more complicated. And yes, he most likely, I don't know, I'm not Pierre, but I believe that he doesn't know anything about it. I believe that even if something was going on in his campaign, he wouldn't know anything about it, because campaigns are, multi-layered. There's many different structures to it. You don't, the candidate for leader doesn't know everything that's going on in a campaign. There's just not enough room in their brain to hold all that information. It's just not possible. So I believe him. I just think that as a leader, and yes, did they play politics? Did Justin Trudeau play politics with this? Boy, yes, he did. But as a leader of a party, you have a responsibility to get all of the information that you need to know in order to act upon it, right? So if there is information that says so-and-so is implicated in this or whatever it is your responsibility to find that information and have consequences for whoever was involved in any wrongdoing, if there was anybody who was involved. For me, this is a question of leadership, right? You're a leader of a party. This is a very important thing. That's like being the CEO of a company, right? You're in charge. Whether he likes it or not, the MPs, sure, constitutionally, that's not really how it works, fine. But realistically, those MPs report to him. He's in charge. He's the boss. So if there's something going on in your party that ceases, I'm not talking about like some random Joe across the street. We're talking about the intelligence service, and they're telling you, look, this is information you should be aware of, and you're like, I don't want to get clearance because I don't want to know. For me, whether he there was wrongdoing or no wrongdoing, for me, that's a question of leadership. Like, really, you're gonna be the guy who's gonna run a country? You can't even, run a party, buddy. I got a little passionate there. But so that's kind of my perspective on it.
I would just
Yeah, go ahead.
I would just add that Justin Trudeau knows. Mark Carney knows. Justin Trudeau, in January of 2024, could have picked up the phone and called Pierre.
Mhm.
Mark Carney, when he took over as leader, he could do it right now. He could pick up the phone right now.
Mhm.
I'm sure Pierre would take the phone call. They could pick up the phone right now and call Pierre Poilievre and tell him what the information is without revealing sources and methods, because I think that's what CSIS is trying to protect. But that's not what's being done here, which is why this is about politics.
Agree. This has been politicized for
Yeah,
sure, as
yeah,
everything would be. I mean, realistically, they're
right.
politicians. That's what they do. It's not like Pierre is like, oh, I'm the politics-free politician here.
Right.
No.
And the last thing that I would say is, why hasn't Pierre done anything?
Yeah.
Well, I go back to the finding of the report,
Mm-hmm.
and Justice Hogue didn't say that there was any action that party leaders needed to take. She kind of painted a broad brush and said that there were instances of, her exact wording, I don't know, people could look it up, but she basically said that there was not really anything that she could do and that was actionable. So I don't know. I think whoever forms the next government needs to make sure that all of this comes out, because we have talked about this before we even started this podcast. This has been an issue. Russia, China, throw India in there too. All of these different countries, they want to exert their influence on democracies across the world. Russia and China for sure. I don't know India's motives because that's still not clear. But Russia and China for sure, because they're trying to become the economic and military superpowers of the world. So I hope that at the end of the day, who knows, maybe we'll get more about this at the debates. We'll see, right?
Yeah, yeah, I hope so. We'll hear. You know what? For a long time, Canadians always thought that we're not interesting. Nobody cares about Canada. And look, everybody cares about Canada, but maybe not in such a good way. We want them to care about us in better ways. Let's talk a little bit about Carney. He is also in a little bit of trouble, I would say. He seems to be getting in trouble lately, a lot. Every couple of days, there's some story about Mr. Carney that's not very nice. Some of his funds are in tax havens in Bermuda. That's not something that voters are going to like very much because, well, Canadians won't like it if their politicians are trying to avoid paying taxes. But, this story came out. I mean, tax havens are widely used. It's not, completely unheard of. But how do you think this is going to impact him, if it is going to impact him electorally? Do you think this is something that will have an impact?
Well, like I said, the fire hose of information that voters are going to be getting in this election campaign is just going to be like, I think at some point people are just not going to listen, right? The fire hose goes both ways, right? We're just talking about Pierre and foreign interference, and now we're talking about Carney and his overseas tax havens, or whatever the hell you want to call it. And he does talk a good talk about foreign interference, but his hands are, just as dirty. I'm curious to know what leverage the Chinese Communist Party or Donald Trump will use because of Brookfield's alleged loans and his business ties with the United States. He said today that when it comes to Brookfield and when it comes to having an overseas tax haven, or whatever you want to call it, that Canadian taxes are still paid. But that doesn't make any sense. Why would you send your money overseas and then bring it back into Canada? Like, it doesn't pass the smell test. Again, like, Brookfield is still going to keep on coming up and up and up and again, because I think the Conservatives are trying to build this story
Yeah.
of, he ain't like us, to quote Kendrick Lamar,
Yeah.
right? I don't know if it hasn't. Sorry?
I think that's the narrative. You explained that he ain't like us, right? He's just
Right.
this rich
Right.
elite guy who travels the world and hasn't spent enough time in Canada and uses tax havens because, he's very, very rich. Clearly, the average person is not using tax havens.
I'm not.
Yeah.
All my money is
Neither
in
am I.
Canada.
Neither am I. So I think it plays into the narrative of he's this out of touch guy who, has no business governing our country. I don't know. It's like you said, the information, there's just too much information.
Yeah.
And it's
And
only been 3 days.
To be fair to Carney, what I will say is politically, I don't know how this is going to impact voters. I don't know how the foreign interference thing is going to impact voters, because this is Wednesday. We're recording this on Wednesday and we're already talking about this stuff. Public opinion does not change in 5 hours, right? There are things can have an immediate emotional impact on voters, but there are 30 something days. And if this is the steady stream of information that we're going to be getting for the next 35 days, I really don't know who's going to win the election. But we'll talk more about Jagmeet in a second. But what people have to understand is this election is a binary choice. I know that we have, 30 million different parties. We have 5 main parties, but this is going to be a binary choice between Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives and Mark Carney. And I think voters are starting to understand that, because you went back to talking about the tariffs that were announced today. Donald Trump announced 25% tariffs on all autos made outside of the United States. What that executive order says, what that actually means, the Prime Minister said he doesn't even know. So we have to figure out how that's going to impact. But it's only day 3. It's only day 3, and I've never seen so much information. I mean, the first election that I paid attention to was 2015. I couldn't even vote then. I was 16 or 15 then. But 16. Yeah, it would be 16. No, 15. Yeah. Anyways, whatever. That's another story.
I got elected in 2014.
Yeah. I couldn't even. Yeah.
Oh boy, I'm getting old.
Yeah.
This is gonna be. We should clip this. The moment I discovered I'm old. It's when Cody told me he was 14 when I got elected.
Yeah.
Anyway, I get where you're going with this. It's a lot of information, and you're right. It's day 3, and this is what's happening. For sure, there's more coming. They're not going to stop. They're not going to okay, we got everything out on day 3, and now we can just go back to a regular campaign. No, it's going to be
because I'll be sorry. I'm gonna go on one more tiny little tangent. I know, we both know, because we've worked on campaigns before. We've been a part of these things. There's a thing called opposition research, and it's where people get paid to sit in a war room and to plan the rollout of opposition research. Things like, this candidate made a stupid Facebook post, right? I can't imagine what that's going to be like when the Conservatives are hitting the Liberals and the Liberals are hitting the Conservatives. And at the end of the day, I don't know where voters are going to fall ultimately. But what I do know is that the choice, people are either going to vote based on the economy or they're going to vote based on Donald Trump. And whoever is seen as to better handle one of those issues or 2 of those issues or variation of both, that's going to be the winner of the election.
I agree with that. That's a very good assessment. Let's talk for a few moments about Jagmeet Singh. He is in the fight of his life, I guess. It's tough to be an NDP. You mentioned a little bit about how they did get a lot of work done, right? They did get pharmacare. They did, advocate for a lot of things. And the agreement that he had with Trudeau, because he had him in such a tough spot, and Trudeau wanted to govern forever. He had no intention of ever leaving. And his polls kept dropping and dropping and dropping. And Jagmeet really made the best of that.
I still think he I still think he doesn't want to leave, and he's not prime minister anymore.
He still wishes he was. But I think, honestly, to be fair, he did make the best of it, right? He saw a bad situation and he did make the best of it. But what he didn't do is he didn't capture or understand the mood of the country. And he got on the nerves of Canadians by doing it. Because Canadians weren't thinking of all, and these programs are great programs. I support these programs. Of course, pharmacare is an amazing program. Dental care is an amazing program. These are all really good things, right? But it wasn't on the mind of Canadians. That wasn't what was on their mind. And I think he in his support of the government in order to get some things done. And of course, there's all sorts of, questions about, was he supporting them because he wants suspension, blah, 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 all these kinds of things. Sure, I get it, right? Politics is politics. But I think in the process of trying to get these things done, two things happened. One, like I said, he got on the nerves of Canadians because that wasn't what was on their mind. They were thinking about other priorities, the economy, their pocketbook issues, affordability, the housing crisis that went unaddressed for so long, interest rates, all of those things, the carbon tax, which they were very upset about. So that's one. And then the other thing, he really failed to be able to really take credit for it, right? And that's a very tricky thing when you're not in government. Very, very, very tricky thing when you're not in government. Because the government's doing everything. So of course they're going to take credit for everything, right? So all of a sudden, pharmacare is liberal pharmacare, right? So it's a very tricky situation that he found himself in. I think this was going to be a really tough election for the NDP and for him specifically. And I think it's going to be a question of his long-term longevity as a leader of the NDP. But what do you think, Cody? It's a tough situation. Like, I really don't envy him. I really think he's in a really tough spot. And he's been in a tough spot for a very long time. Regardless of what you think of him personally. Like, it's just a tough spot.
Yeah. Well, I've said many times before, and you said a lot of what I was going to say, so I'm very upset, but whatever. He should have brought down the government in November. Because, yes, he would have had to put up with a conservative supermajority, but he would have been leader of the opposition, most likely. I think, anyways. Here's the problem. This election, and I'm sorry to say this to people who are supporters of the NDP who watch this podcast, but this really is a binary choice. There are 5 parties. Lots of people are going to vote for the other parties, but this is a choice between the Conservatives and the Liberals. And at the end of the day, Singh is being forced, like just today, he can't afford a plane. They're not able to fundraise money for a plane. So he's being forced to spend valuable time crisscrossing the country or wherever they're going to go on a bus. Now, maybe he'll fly in and out. Maybe he'll do commercial flights or whatever, or charter. I don't know, right? But if you don't have a plane to run a national campaign, it seems like you're going to be running a campaign to save the furniture. And when we're in an election environment where voters want to vote for the person who's going to be able to handle the economy and Donald Trump, and if you're not going to form government, then it doesn't make you a credible choice, right? And especially for progressive voters, there's no strategic voting in this election, right? If Justin Trudeau was still on the ballot and it looked like that the progressive vote was going to be split, that's very different. But I become increasingly more convinced, like even, and you could see it, like the good thing about these campaigns, and in some ways the way the media covers them, like you watch CPAC, I mean, not everybody does, but I watch a lot of the videos when the leaders speak.
Yeah.
And you can really, when they're out there every day, you can see how they're feeling because humans can't hide emotion. And with him, I'm starting to get the impression from him. I saw him speak today and yesterday and the day before. I'm starting to get the impression that even he knows that the clock is ticking. And if the polls are going to end up the way they are, and the NDP are going to be in single digits, not get party status, and essentially get wiped out, the NDP is going to be in a leadership race. And
I don't know if it'll be that bad, but I think there'll definitely be a leadership race, but I don't know if they'll actually get wiped out. Let's see how things play.
I should clarify that. When I say wiped out, I don't mean like 0 seats, but losing their party status is definitely on the table for them. Now, to be fair, the NDP, they have an efficient vote, right? Much like the Conservatives, they have a strong base. They have people who are going to show up in certain areas no matter what, okay? And if Jagmeet Singh, if he runs a campaign to save, I don't even like Sort of like what Merritt Stiles did. She focused on a lot of incumbent seats
Yeah.
because she knew that in order to retain her position as leader of the opposition, she had to spend a lot of time with incumbents.
Mhm.
Because if you don't have your incumbents, then you're obviously going to lose a lot of seats.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
think that being the strategy for sure.
but yeah, we'll see what happens. Like I said, and a lot can change. The NDP, they could find their stride
Hmm.
and they could come back and I could look like a total freaking idiot in 30 something days, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we will see. We shall see. Just to let our listeners and viewers know, we are you know, you're not saying things. We are doing more frequent episodes for the duration of the federal election. So we're going to be aiming for a couple of times a week. We're going to be trying to bring you some really cool interviews, I think, that I'm really excited about. And we're going to be talking to a lot of people and, you know, continuing to keep you updated about everything that's going on. This is week 1. I think it should get more
Not
interesting.
even. This is like day 3.
This is day 3. It should get it should get even more interesting. And Cody is right. We are going to do something special for the debates and for election night. We haven't really figured out exactly what we want to do for the debates. I'm thinking maybe a post debate live stream might be cool, and of course we'll do our live stream for the federal election like we did with the provincial one. But we thank you very much for continuing to tune in, to continuing to listen to us, and send us your thoughts. And I don't think many people are shy. We get a lot of comments on many different platforms, so just, you know, sometimes they say we don't know what we're talking about, and we appreciate that anyway. Well, thank you so much. We are reading it, and we message.
Yeah, and the last thing that I would say too is you and I, we both have our own opinions. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree. We have our own personal preferences, but at the end of the day, if there are people who represent the NDP, the Liberal, whoever party, if you want to come on here, and even if we don't necessarily agree with you, we will still give you the space to hear out your views, and you can air out your views, and we'll give them a fair hearing.
Yeah,
And the
absolutely.
other thing that, and yes, and the other thing that I would say too is a lot of people get cynical with politics, but it's important. And regardless of who you're going to vote for in the next election, I think it's worthwhile reminding everybody to just get out and vote. Because at the end of the day, it could be, you know, it's one thing to sit in front of a computer screen or listen in your earbuds to two people yapping sometimes off the top of their head. But none of that matters if you don't go out and vote. And that's what I would say.
For sure. And, we'll remind you again, because you know it's 30 days, and we're 100% sure that you're gonna forget. We appreciate the time, and like Cody said, we are open to talking to everybody. We will be reaching out to individuals and candidates from all the different parties, including the Bloc. We want to hear from the Bloc. I mean, we're based in Ontario. We don't see a lot of Bloc people around here, but you know, come talk to us. We want to know what you're up
Wee
to.
wee, wee wee.
Yeah, but you'll have to speak to us in English, please.
Yes.
But yeah, we want to know what you're up to, and what you know, what happens if Eve actually becomes prime minister, if that's ever to be the case. But thank you again very, very much, and we will come back to you very soon.